A K9 sniffer dog named Max forever changed the fate of 7 children when, in a bold move that defied all protocols, he delivered a suspicious backpack directly into the hands of the police. Time was slipping away for the little ones, hidden in a place that would have remained undiscovered without his extraordinary instincts. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The silence of the early morning hung over the deserted streets of Salvador, broken only by the rhythmic patter of Max's paws on the wet cobblestones. The German shepherd advanced with unwavering determination, his ears perked to catch every whisper of the sleeping city. His black and gold fur gleamed under the dim streetlights as he sniffed the air with growing unease. Beside him walked João Silva, a seasoned officer whose tired eyes revealed many sleepless nights. João adjusted the holster at his waist, watching his canine partner with quiet admiration as they pressed on. The sea breeze carried the familiar scent of the bay, but it did little to ease the dark thoughts haunting João. "Stay calm, partner," he murmured, more to himself than to Max. Memories of the Mendonça case still tormented him. 3 years since he had arrived too late to save that family. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of that failure like a lead cloak on his shoulders. Suddenly, Max halted, his body tense as a drawn bow. His nose quivered, detecting something beyond human senses. He turned toward a pile of discarded cardboard boxes in a narrow alley, letting out a low whine that João knew all too well. "What have you found, Max?" João asked, approaching cautiously. The dog sniffed the rain-soaked boxes intently, then used his front paws to push them aside, revealing a colorful child's backpack adorned with superhero prints. Dark stains covered part of the fabric, fresh blood. João's and Max's eyes met in a moment of shared understanding. A chill ran down João's spine as he knelt to examine it. The city slept on, oblivious, but Max's keen instincts had uncovered the first thread of a dark mystery. "Good work," João whispered, stroking the dog's head briefly before reaching for his radio. Something terrible had happened, and this bloodied backpack was just the beginning. Max stayed alert, as if sensing that this night was only the start of a trial that would push them both to their limits. The metallic tang of blood mixed with the damp night air as rain began to fall over Salvador. João Silva held the small, blood-stained backpack with trembling hands, the weight of responsibility growing heavier by the second. He unzipped it carefully, revealing a colorful school notebook and a little stuffed bear marked with red stains. His stomach churned. "We have to find her," he murmured to Max, who kept his nose to the ground, nostrils flaring as he analyzed every scent. The rain intensified, threatening to wash away the trails that could lead to the missing children. Desperation built in João's chest, echoes of his past failure urging him not to repeat it. Then Max emitted a low, controlled growl, his alert signal. His ears shot up, and his muscular body tensed like a violin string. Without hesitation, the dog darted into a narrow alleyway, his paws silent on the wet stones. João followed, the backpack feeling like a ton in his grip, raindrops sliding down his face. "Keep going, partner," João whispered, trusting Max completely. The dog weaved between trash bins and debris, as if following an invisible map. After 5 tense minutes, Max stopped abruptly in front of an abandoned building. A rusty door, half hidden by vines, drew his focus. He positioned himself at the entrance, his intelligent eyes locking onto João's. Faint sounds emerged through the rain's drumbeat, muffled voices, stifled cries. João pressed his ear to the door, holding his breath. Human sounds, weak but real. Someone was inside, and time was running out. The musty smell of decay filled the air as João shouldered the door open, the rotting wood giving way with a creak. Max entered first, fur bristling as he sniffed the floor. João switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness to reveal a horrifying sight. In the center of the room, a young girl was tied to an old chair. Ana Oliveira trembled, her wide eyes reflecting sheer terror. Her dark hair was tangled, her pale face smeared with dirt, and rope marks reddened her wrists. "You're safe now," João whispered, approaching slowly to avoid frightening her further. As he worked on the ropes, rage simmered inside him. Who could do this to a child? Ana said nothing, but her eyes darted to a dark corner, urging him to look. Max, showing a gentleness only dogs seem to possess, approached her softly and licked her hand, as if to say, "I'm here to protect you." The gesture eased her slightly, a tear rolling down her cheek as she relaxed. "Is there anyone else here?" João asked gently. Ana nodded, words failing her. The trauma was etched into her every movement. 8 years old, and she carried a burden no adult should endure. João freed her ropes and knelt before her. "We'll get you out. Max and I will keep you safe." The dog positioned himself protectively beside her, his presence a comfort beyond words. With trembling hands, João untied Ana's wrists. She collapsed into his arms, her small body shaking like a leaf. After a moment, she pulled back and whispered, "There are more children. They're still here." João's heart raced. This changed everything. Hope, long lost after his last failure, ignited within him. "Do you know where they are, Ana?" he asked calmly. She shook her head, silent tears falling. Max sniffed the rotting wooden floor, leading them to a corner where a worn, one-armed doll lay. Under it, João found a crumpled piece of paper with a hastily scribbled address and a drawing of 7 circles, 7 people. 7 children? João murmured. Ana nodded, clinging tighter. The address pointed to an old warehouse in Salvador's port, not far away. "We'll get them out first," João said to Max, who watched him intently, as if understanding every word. This scrap of paper linked to something bigger, a possible child trafficking ring. Every second counted. "You were so brave," João whispered to Ana as they headed for the exit, Max leading the way. Outside, Salvador buzzed with June festivities. Colorful banners swayed, and the scents of roasted corn and sweets filled the air. João held Ana close, shielding her from the chaos. But then fireworks exploded overhead, startling Max. The blasts disoriented him, his sharp senses overwhelmed. "Come on, Max!" João called, but the dog circled, losing the trail amid the noise. A nearby accordion played, joined by drums and triangles, as dancers in bright costumes rushed by, unaware of the drama unfolding. "We need to reach the station," João muttered, carrying Ana through the crowd. Tension gripped him as Max struggled to refocus. Finally, with a determined bark, the dog regained his bearings and stayed close, protecting them as they pushed through the festive maze. At the police station, fluorescent lights flickered over Ana's pale face as she huddled, trying to explain about her friends. Across the room, Detective Maria Santos adjusted her badge on her pristine blazer, her calculating eyes shifting between notes and her phone. "This case could be my ticket to promotion," she murmured to herself, more concerned with media buzz than the ticking clock for the other children. With mechanical gestures, she organized the evidence, prioritizing headlines over lives. João watched the scene with rising indignation. The police officer knew that posture all too well. Detective Maria always prioritized her image over the victims. He approached the little girl and offered her a glass of water, crouching down to her eye level. Anna, I know you're scared, but every detail you can remember might save your friends, he said, his voice gentle. In the background, the detective huffed impatiently. In the corner of the room, Max refused to lie down on the makeshift blanket. The German shepherd, despite a front paw wounded by broken glass from the abandoned house, remained on high alert. The K9 officer sniffed insistently at a blood-stained backpack, ignoring all commands to rest. That animal needs to be seen by a vet, Maria commented with disdain. It's getting in the way of my investigation. As if he understood the criticism, Max intensified his efforts, scratching at the fabric of the child's backpack. João recognized his partner's persistence and emptied the contents onto the table. Broken crayons, torn notebooks, and a small music box with a ballerina on top. Suddenly, the box began to play on its own, a soft, melancholic melody that made Anna lift her head. That's Luana's song, she whispered, her eyes wide. João examined the object carefully and discovered a hidden mechanism in its base. When he pressed it, a secret compartment opened, revealing a small, folded piece of paper. Max let out a single bark, as if approving of the find. Coordinates, João murmured, unfolding the paper with trembling hands. And a name. Warehouse 7, Port of Salvador. Maria Santos snatched the paper from his hand. This is official evidence now. I'll organize a tactical operation for first light tomorrow. Tomorrow will be too late, João protested, as Max growled softly at the detective. The dog, though exhausted, remained on his feet, as if he understood that every lost minute diminished the chances of finding the other children alive. Just then, the station door creaked open, interrupting the tense moment. Dona Estela Costa entered, leaning on a worn wooden cane. The 72-year-old woman, known for her sharp eye and the ever-open window from which she observed the street, walked with purpose to the front desk. I need to speak with someone in charge, the elderly woman announced, adjusting the colorful shawl on her shoulders. I have important information. Maria appeared, sizing up Estella with an impatient glance. The detective was more concerned with the press conference she planned to give than with the testimony of an old woman. I've seen a dark van circling our street, Dona Estella reported, ignoring the detective's dismissive expression. Every night, always at the same time. The driver wears a cap and never gets out. He just watches. Her shrewd eyes fixed on João. Last night, I saw children being moved into another car. The officer exchanged a look with Max. The dog, as if understanding every word, let out a low whine. Did you get a look at the license plate? João asked, stepping closer. Partially, Estella replied, pulling a slip of paper from her crochet bag. I wrote down what I could make out, even with these tired old eyes. João took the paper, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon him. The partial plate numbers, combined with the address at the port, were pieces of a macabre puzzle that was starting to make sense. We have to move now, he muttered, as Max was already positioning himself by the door, ready to follow a trail that could save innocent lives before time ran out. A tightness gripped João Silva's chest as he watched Maria Santos command the room. The detective seemed more interested in the spotlight the case could bring than in the children's welfare. Something was wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that there were compromised people within his own department. I'm following Dona Estela's lead on my own, he murmured to himself, stroking Max's head. The German shepherd stared intently at his partner, as if he understood every word. The old woman had described the van with startling detail. Dark gray, a broken taillight, and a delivery company sticker on the windshield. Estella was one of those people whom the years had made only more observant. I trust her and this dog more than I trust most people in uniform, João thought, pulling out his phone and disabling the GPS. If there was a leak, he wouldn't leave a trail. In the main room, Maria was gesturing emphatically, barking orders and organizing search teams. Her gaze met João's for a moment, and he saw a flash of irritation when she noticed him heading for the exit. Silva, where do you think you're going? We're in the middle of an operation. The detective's voice cut through the air. Checking a lead. I'll be back soon, he replied curtly, offering no further explanation. Max, sensing the tension, gently tugged at João's pant leg, guiding him away. The animal's instincts never failed, and the officer knew it better than anyone. They stepped out onto the cobblestone streets, still wet from a recent rain. The sky hung heavy, threatening another storm. Max moved with purpose, as if a mental map of Salvador were etched into his canine mind. As they neared the port, the distinct scent of the sea filled their nostrils. Salt mixed with the smell of fish and diesel from the fishing boats. The tension mounted with every step, making João's heart pound in his chest. Is this where it begins or where it ends, partner? He whispered to Max, who kept his nose raised, catching every scent on the damp air. The port was nearly deserted at this hour. João looked toward the horizon, where the sea met the overcast sky, creating a gray, indefinite line, exactly how he felt about the case, caught between certainty and doubt, between hope and the fear of failing again. Max barked softly, pulling him back to the present. It was time to act. The salty breeze from the port of Salvador swirled around João Silva as he watched Max scent the damp sand, tireless. The German shepherd dug with a determination that suggested his own life depended on it. Suddenly, the dog stopped, looking up at the officer with eyes that seemed to speak. João moved closer and, clearing away the sand with his hands, uncovered buried plastic bags. His heart skipped a beat as he opened the first one. Children's clothes. Small, colorful t-shirts, shorts, tiny socks. Some still with store tags, others with stains he chose not to examine. My God, he murmured, his stomach churning. Each piece of clothing was a punch to the gut. A painful reminder that real children, children like Anna, were in danger right now. He wiped the sweat from his brow, fighting back memories of his last failure. Max barked sharply, alerting his partner. In the distance, a dark van had appeared in the port area, just as Dona Estela had described. The vehicle moved slowly, as if searching. João's hand instinctively went to his sidearm as he watched the driver through the windshield. Their eyes met, and for a split second, time froze. The man behind the wheel went pale with recognition, and without hesitating, slammed on the accelerator. Tires squealed on the wet asphalt of the pier. Damn it! João yelled, sprinting to his patrol car parked a few yards away. He started the engine with shaking hands, while Max, understanding the situation perfectly, leaped into the vehicle through the open window. The pursuit began, a frantic chase through the narrow streets of the historic center. The van weaved between parked cars and startled pedestrians, with João hot on its tail. Max remained alert, his body tense, ready to act at a moment's notice. The patrol car's lights strobed across the walls of old colonial houses as sirens tore through the night air. We're going to get them, partner, João said to the dog, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He couldn't fail again. Not with 7 more children in danger. The van took a sharp turn onto a cobblestone street, nearly flipping over. It was heading toward Pelourinho, where the streets grew even tighter and the holiday crowds would make it impossible to follow. He had to intercept them before they reached the throng, or the trail would go cold forever. The van skidded violently around a corner, spraying mud and water, and vanished into the darkness. João Silva slammed his fist against the steering wheel in frustration. He got out of the car and knelt to examine the tire tracks imprinted on the wet asphalt. "Damn it," he muttered, as a light rain began to wash the evidence away. It was then that Max, his keen nose to the ground, sniffed out something among the debris left by the fleeing van. The German shepherd barked, demanding his partner's attention. João moved closer, and his heart leaped when he saw it. A colored hair ribbon, identical to the one Anna had described through her tears at the station. He picked it up carefully, as if it were the most fragile proof in the world. "We're on the right track, partner," he whispered to the dog, sealing the evidence in a plastic bag. But Max was restless. The dog began to tug at João's pants, pulling him away from the tire tracks. The officer tried to lead him back to the car, but the animal resisted, barking insistently. "What is it, Max? What are you sensing?" João's training told him to follow the physical trail, but years of partnership with Max had taught him to trust the animal's exceptional instincts. Reluctantly, he gave in. The dog immediately bolted down a narrow alley, dimly lit by the distant glow of the city. They ran through unfamiliar passages, moving away from the city center. Max pushed forward with conviction, as if following a map invisible to human eyes. After 10 minutes, they arrived at an unfinished construction site, abandoned for years according to the faded graffiti on its walls. The exposed concrete building rose like a gray skeleton against the night sky. Max stopped abruptly, his ears pricked, and then João heard it. Muffled sounds, almost imperceptible, echoing from within the structure. Children's voices, whispers, and a stifled sob that made his blood run cold. The officer crouched beside Max, stroking the dog's damp fur. "You found them, partner," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We're getting them out of here." Heart pounding, weapon drawn, João moved into the abandoned building, his faithful partner at his side. Max led the way down the dark corridor of the unfinished building, his sensitive nose picking up the unmistakable scent of childhood fear. The German shepherd stopped before a metal door, scratching at it insistently while letting out a low whine. João understood the signal immediately. He pressed his ears fond to the rusted door, hearing faint sobs and muffled movements. "We're here to help. Stay calm," he announced, his voice firm but kind. The response was a chorus of small voices, some so weak they were barely audible. João tried the lock, but it was jammed. Without a second thought, he slammed his shoulder against the door. On the third impact, the metal gave way, but a sharp, twisted edge tore a deep gash in his arm. Blood flowed freely, staining his uniform, but the adrenaline numbed the pain. The scene inside was devastating. 7 children were tied up in different corners of the damp, dark room. Their eyes, accustomed to the gloom, winced at the sudden light from the hallway. Max, showing a sensitivity that belied his working dog demeanor, approached each child slowly, nudging them gently with his nose. "It's the police dog," whispered a boy of about 6, his voice hoarse from dehydration. Max allowed each child to touch his fur, offering a silent solace that no words could provide. A little girl with undone braids reached out a trembling hand and stroked the dog's head, tears of relief carving paths down her dirt-streaked face. João, ignoring the throbbing wound in his arm, used his pocket knife to slice through the ropes that bound the children. "You're safe now," he repeated, his voice a steady anchor as he freed each one. His experienced hands worked quickly, despite the escalating pain. The children, all showing clear signs of exhaustion and hunger, huddled around the officer and his dog. An older boy, who looked to be about 10, tried to stand, but his legs gave way. João caught him with his good arm. "How long have you been here?" the officer asked, while Max continued his gentle work of comforting the smaller ones. "Days, I think," answered a girl with curly hair. "They only gave us stale bread and water." João noticed that some of the children bore bruises and scrapes. Despite their weakness, their eyes shone with a renewed hope as they watched Max, who seemed to perfectly understand his role in their rescue. The dog then positioned himself at the door like a silent guardian as the officer organized the group for their departure. "We're leaving. Follow Max. He knows the way," João instructed, pressing down on the wound that was beginning to pulse with intensity. The children, though weary, found the strength to follow their four-legged savior. A clap of thunder tore through the Salvador sky, announcing the arrival of a tropical storm. João Silva glanced worriedly at the ceiling of the unfinished building, where pieces of concrete had begun to crumble. The children, still traumatized from their captivity, flinched at the sound, pressing closer to one another. "We have to get out of here now," the officer said, trying to keep his voice calm as he watched the damp walls seem to vibrate with each new gust of wind. The old structure groaned dangerously, as if begging to collapse. Max, though limping from a wound on his forepaw, naturally took the lead. The German shepherd sniffed the air, thick with moisture and dust, and identified the safest path through the debris. His K9 instincts remained sharp, even under extreme pressure. "Follow Max," João ordered the children, scooping the smallest one, who could barely walk, into his arms. "He knows the way." The dog moved through the dark corridors, pausing occasionally to ensure everyone was behind him. His dark silhouette, a beacon of hope against the gray walls, guided them forward. When one of the children stumbled, Max immediately turned back, nudging them gently with his snout until they were on their feet again. Outside, the rain intensified, turning the ground to slick mud. Another thunderous crash shook the building, sending a wooden beam tumbling down just feet from them. Two of the children screamed, but the officer calmed them with firm words. "Trust in Max. He'll get us out of here." The dog, as if understanding the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, remained unshaken. When they reached a corridor blocked by rubble, he quickly found an alternate passage, leading them through a narrower path. The roar of the storm mingled with the soft, relieved sobs of the 7 children. One of them, a boy of about 10, reached out a trembling hand to touch the German shepherd's wet fur, seeking comfort in his presence. "Is he magic?" one of the girls whispered to another, Ana Oliveira, who, despite her exhaustion, managed a small smile. "No," Ana replied, watching as Max patiently waited for everyone to pass through a narrow opening before proceeding. "He's a hero." When they finally saw the exit, rain was falling in dense curtains. João Silva gathered the children, shielding them as best he could with his own body, while Max stood alert, ensuring no threat would surprise them in their moment of vulnerability. For these rescued children, the dog's courage had become the only tangible hope in a world that had shown them nothing but cruelty. The storm fell upon Salvador with relentless fury. João Silva and the rescued children fought against the torrential rain, while Max, though exhausted, remained vigilant, guiding the group through the flooded streets. The officer tried his radio again, but it crackled with only static. "Dispatch, this is Silva. I need immediate backup. I have 7 rescued children. I repeat, 7 children. Does anyone copy?" Only the persistent hiss answered. João checked the frequency, then the battery. Everything seemed to be working. It was then he realized it wasn't a technical failure. Someone was deliberately blocking his signal. A cold dread crept down his spine. He looked at the drenched children, then at Max, who stared back with knowing eyes, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. Suspicion spread like venom through his veins. There was a traitor in the force. "We can't go back to the station," he murmured to himself. Ana Oliveira, shivering from the cold, tugged on his sleeve. "I'm scared, Uncle João." He knelt to her level. "It's going to be okay. Trust me and Max." The German shepherd gently licked the child's hand, as if sealing the promise. João knew they needed a safe place, far from the eyes of the police. There was only one place they could go. "We're going to Dona Estella's house," he decided. Suspicion gnawed at him as he led the group through the narrow streets. Who could be behind this? Maria Santos, with her boundless ambition? Or was it someone closer? Someone he trusted? The rain lashed at their faces as they pushed forward. João carried one of the smaller children, whose legs had given out. The weight of a past failure threatened to crush him. The memory of another child, years ago, whom he hadn't been able to save. His hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from the fear of failing again. Max stopped abruptly, ears pricked. A vehicle was approaching. The officer signaled for everyone to hide in a nearby alley. A patrol car crawled past, its headlights sweeping the streets. "Trust no one," João whispered to the children. "Only Max and Dona Estela." When the danger had passed, they resumed their journey. With every step, João's determination hardened. This time would be different. This time he would not fail. Even if he had to face the entire department, even if the enemy was someone he called a friend, he would protect these children. Estela Costa's house appeared in the distance, a single light of hope in the storm. João quickened his pace with Max at his side, his only truly reliable partner on this night of betrayal. Ana Oliveira sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a colorful blanket. Though her eyes were still shadowed by fear, she found the strength to share something she had kept to herself. As João Silva approached with a mug of hot chocolate, the 8-year-old whispered, her voice trembling, "Uncle João, I heard them talking about a policeman. They called him our friend at the station." Ana paused, trying to recall more. "They said he would warn them when you were getting close." The words struck João like a physical blow. His face went pale. Was it possible that someone from his own department was involved? Suspicion fell upon people he had considered allies, colleagues he had known for years. The ground seemed to fall away beneath his feet. His trust, already fragile from past experiences, now shattered completely. "Are you sure, Ana? Can you remember a name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady so as not to frighten her further. The little girl shook her head, hugging her knees. Sensing the tension, Max drew near and rested his head on her lap, offering his silent comfort. From the other side of Dona Estela Costa's home, the comforting aroma of corn and cinnamon filled every corner. The elderly woman moved with surprising energy between the stove and the table, preparing food that spoke of childhood and safety. Corn cake, sweet hominy, and tapioca porridge were served in generous portions to the rescued children. Eat, my little ones. Food feeds the body and soothes the soul, Estella said, with her simple wisdom, as she helped the youngest ones hold their spoons. Her modest home, with its peeling walls and antique furniture, had become a sanctuary. Old photographs on the walls bore witness to decades of life, and every object seemed to tell a story of resilience. The children, once terrified, now snuggled into the worn sofas, finding a warmth that had been stolen from them. João watched the scene from the kitchen doorway, torn between gratitude for Estella's kindness and the anguish of the betrayal Anna had revealed. How could he continue the investigation without knowing who to trust? Who could he turn to when the police themselves might be compromised? In that moment, only two things remained unshakable: the loyalty of Max, who had not left Anna's side, and the unconditional goodness of Estella, who had turned her simple home into the only safe harbor in a storm that had not yet passed. The storm finally began to subside, leaving Salvador's sky a bruised gray that mirrored the tension of the last few days. Max, his fur still damp, sniffed the air with renewed determination. The German shepherd tugged at his leash, signaling to João Silva that they needed to return to the port. The officer, trusting his partner's instincts completely, didn't question it. As they walked through the wet streets, João felt sharp pains shooting through the arm he had injured during the rescue. Still, he followed the dog with a steady gait. The salty sea air grew stronger as they neared the waterfront. With his nose to the ground, Max followed a trail invisible to human eyes, but perfectly clear to his trained senses. At the port, he ran directly to an area of abandoned shipping containers. Sniffing near the water's edge, he began to dig frantically in the wet sand. João moved closer, his heart hammering in his chest as Max unearthed a small child's shoe. Not far off, they found more belongings: a waterlogged school notebook and a small necklace with a butterfly pendant. "There are more children," the officer murmured, kneeling to examine the objects. "This nightmare is far from over." Max barked in agreement, continuing to search the area. Each new clue was like a knife to João's heart. The officer photographed everything with his phone, meticulously documenting the evidence they found. His thoughts returned to Ana Oliveira and the other children, now safe in Dona Estella's care. Back at the makeshift shelter, João found the 7 children sitting in a circle while the old woman served them hot chocolate in colorful mugs. Despite their recent trauma, the little ones were already showing signs of recovery, thanks to her affectionate care. "I promise every single one of you," João said, kneeling in the center of the circle, "we will find the people who did this, and we will bring them to justice." The frightened little eyes stared back at him, with a mixture of fear and hope. Anna, the bravest of the group, reached out and touched the officer's injured arm. "You, Max, and Dona Estella, you're our heroes," she whispered. João knew he couldn't trust everyone in the force after what he'd learned, but looking at Max, who now rested beside the children, and at Estella, who was arranging clean blankets, he felt a reassuring certainty. This unlikely trio had formed an unbreakable bond. Together, they were unstoppable. "We're going to get them all," he promised, and Max raised his ears as if he understood every word. The tension at the Salvador police station was thick enough to cut with a knife. After days of intense investigation, the circle had finally closed around the traitor. Pedro Oliveira, a respected investigator and a close friend of João Silva, was confronted with irrefutable evidence of his involvement in the criminal ring. The proof had been meticulously gathered by João, Max, and Dona Estella, forming a puzzle that was impossible to deny. Why, Pedro? We were like brothers, João asked, his voice thick with deception. The cornered traitor kept his eyes fixed on the floor. You wouldn't understand, João. Some debts can't be paid on a policeman's salary, he finally confessed, revealing how he had sabotaged communications, misdirected investigations, and alerted criminals to police operations. Max, sitting beside his human partner, watched the interrogation with keen eyes, letting out a low growl when Pedro made a sudden move. News of the betrayal spread through the department like wildfire. Officers who had worked side by side for years now exchanged wary glances in the hallways. Who else could be involved? The station walls, once a symbol of security, now seemed to hide dark secrets. He was at our kid's graduation, one veteran officer remarked in disbelief. We had drinks after our shift, lamented another. But for João, his arm still wrapped in a bandage from the rescue, the weight of the betrayal was heavier than for anyone else. Pedro had been his partner before Max, the best man at his wedding, his son's godfather. The pain was almost physical. Late that afternoon, as the sun set over the Bay of All Saints, João found Max waiting patiently for him at the station's entrance. The dog drew near, nudging its muzzle into the officer's hand in a gesture of comfort. At least I know I can trust you, partner, João murmured, stroking the animal's head. That night, gathered in the welcoming home of Dona Estela, João shared the day's events with the elderly woman. The children were already asleep, finally safe, while the two of them spoke in low voices on the veranda. Trust is like porcelain, my son, Estela mused, pouring a cup of strong coffee. Once it's broken, it's never quite the same again. João nodded, watching Max, who remained vigilant even in rest. The officer's determination, and that of his K9 partner, had only grown stronger with the revelation. The case of the kidnapped children was merely the tip of a much larger iceberg, and they were just beginning to uncover its depths. Dona Estela Costa's house had transformed into a haven of hope. The aroma of fresh coffee and sweet fritters filled every room, as shy laughter began to replace the terrified silence of the rescued children. Ana Oliveira, still startled by nightly terrors, found solace in the soft fur of Max, who refused to leave her side, even during meals. That dog has more sense than most grown-ups I know, the old woman would comment, as she served another bowl of sweet corn pudding to the children gathered around the old wooden table. Max, his protective instincts sharp, divided his attention among the 7 children, but he kept a special watch over Anna. The girl was slowly beginning to smile again, whenever the German shepherd rested his head on her lap, or followed her through the house's flowered yard. At night, the animal remained alert at the foot of the makeshift bed where she slept, as if he could ward off her nightmares with his mere presence. João Silva, his arm still in a sling, visited the house daily. The officer faced suspicious glances at the station ever since the discovery of Pedro's betrayal. Colleagues who once greeted him now avoided eye contact, as if proximity to the traitor might somehow contaminate them. They'll get over it, Estela would say, handing him a cup of chamomile tea. Time heals everything, even distrust. The children had created a comforting routine under the old woman's care. In the mornings, they helped water the plants in the yard. In the afternoons, they would draw or listen to stories told by Grandma Estela, as they had started to call her. Their drawings, once dark and confused, were now bursting with bright colors and figures of a protective dog that appeared on almost every sheet of paper. João watched this transformation with a mixture of relief and a sense of inner renewal. For the first time since the failure that haunted him, he felt he had truly made a difference. When one of the children ran to show him a drawing where he and Max were depicted as heroes, the officer felt a lump form in his throat. "You know, João," Estella whispered as the children played in the yard, "sometimes we have to save others to save ourselves." The officer nodded, watching Max, who, though tired, remained watchful as Anna gently brushed his coat. The simple scene held a depth that words could not express. There, in that modest backyard in Salvador, invisible wounds were beginning to heal, for the children and their unlikely saviors alike. The colors and sounds of the June festivals returned to the streets of Salvador. 2 weeks after the rescue, the city that had been scarred by trauma was now breathing a renewed air of hope. The residents, though still shaken, found in the bonds forged between their unlikely heroes a reason to move forward. In the main square, colorful flags swayed in the wind as the smell of boiled corn and sweet tamales filled the air. The city had organized a special celebration that went beyond the yearly tradition. It was a tribute to the courage and resilience that had saved 7 innocent lives. Max, the German shepherd, walked proudly beside João Silva. The dog, normally focused only on his work, seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. A large banner hanging from the bandstand announced, "Max, Hero of Salvador." Dona Estella, with her welcoming smile, adjusted a red bandana she had specially sewn for the dog's neck. "He deserves much more than a banner," the old woman commented, watching the crowd that was forming. "That dog has more humanity than many two-legged folks I know." The rescued children, still recovering but visibly stronger, arrived holding hands. Ana Oliveira led the small group, her eyes shining in a way that had seemed impossible weeks ago. When she spotted Max, the girl let go of her friend's hands and ran towards him. "Max!" she cried, dropping to her knees and throwing her arms around the dog's furry neck. The other 6 children followed her lead, forming a circle of hugs and affection around the animal. Max, patient and gentle, licked each of their faces, as if acknowledging every child he had helped save. João watched the scene, with tears welling in his eyes. The officer, who had for so long carried the weight of failure, now saw his 4-legged partner receive the recognition he deserved. Beside him, the mayor prepared to give a speech, but no official words could capture the emotion of that moment. A few officers from the force approached, including some who had doubted João's suspicions. Now, they offered respectful handshakes and looks of admiration for the pair who had cracked the case when everyone else had failed. The city, wounded but not defeated, found a form of collective healing in the celebration. As traditional music began to play, Max remained at the center of that circle of gratitude, a living symbol that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes come in the most unexpected forms. The scars on João Silva's arm still ached when it rained, but he no longer minded so much. Sitting on Estella's veranda, he watched Max play with the children in the yard. The officer smiled, recognizing how that brown and black dog had transformed his life. Before, João had trusted only in hard evidence and standard procedures. Now, he had learned to value the animal instinct that had so often proven more accurate than any investigative manual. "A little coffee to chase away the chill?" asked Dona Estella, approaching with a steaming mug. The old woman possessed a wisdom that only comes with age, a blend of intuition and experience that perfectly complemented the partnership between man and dog. João accepted the drink, grateful not just for the coffee, but for all the support she had offered during those difficult days. You know, my son, sometimes it takes a tragedy for us to see who is truly by our side, she commented, gazing at the playing children. The unlikely trio, a traumatized police officer, an elderly woman, and a German shepherd, had become a fortress against the evil that had threatened those innocent lives. At the precinct, things had changed. Pedro's betrayal had shaken everyone, but it had also served as a wake-up call. Maria Santos, once so focused on her career, began to show more empathy for victims. The detective had even visited Estella's house a few times, bringing sweets for the children and treats for Max. João observed the change in the people around him, with a mix of hope and caution. The emotional scars ran deeper than the physical ones, but they too were healing. He no longer woke up every night in a cold sweat, reliving his past failures. Redemption tasted like fresh coffee and sounded like children's laughter. Anna, who once trembled at the slightest noise, now ran through the yard with the other children. She still had occasional nightmares, but she only needed to feel Max's soft fur to calm down. That afternoon, exhausted from playing, she snuggled into Estella's arms. With her eyes heavy with sleep, the little girl beckoned to Max with a gentle gesture. The dog, ever attentive, approached immediately. Anna leaned in and whispered in his ear, "You are my hero." The simple words carried all the weight of gratitude and the pure love that only a child can offer. Max, tired but content, lay down beside her. The German shepherd slowly closed his eyes, as if he could finally let his guard down. For the first time in weeks, everyone was at peace. The sun rose over Salvador, casting a golden light on the cobblestone streets that, just the night before, had witnessed such horror. The city awoke different, more vigilant, more united, and above all, more hopeful. On street corners, residents talked about the rescue, sharing not just their relief, but a newfound determination to protect their children. From his hospital window, João Silva watched the city come to life. A smile touched his lips as he saw Max lying at the foot of his bed, finally resting after days of exhaustion. The wounds were deep, not just the physical ones, but the emotional scars that Pedro's betrayal had left on the entire police force. In Dona Estella's house, the 7 rescued children were having breakfast. Anna, now more talkative, was telling stories to the others, as if trying to transform their shared nightmare into something they could overcome together. The old woman buttered their bread, with the kind of care only a grandmother has, her eyes moist as she watched the resilience of the small survivors. At the precinct, Maria Santos arrived earlier than usual. The detective, once focused solely on her career, now leafed through reports with a different kind of gaze. There was a new humanity in her gestures. The case had changed her, even if she was reluctant to admit it. By late afternoon, the main square was filled with residents. An improvised banner celebrated Salvador's heroes, adorned with colorful drawings made by local school children. Max, still limping slightly, was given a lei of flowers and licked the hands of every child who came near to thank him. He knew the whole time, João murmured to Estella, watching the German shepherd receive the children's affection. Sometimes, I wonder who's really in charge of our partnership. The old woman smiled, adjusting the shawl on her shoulders. Some angels have 4 paws, my son. The investigation would continue. The trafficking network had been shaken, but not completely dismantled. Yet, something fundamental had shifted. The community was now alert, bound by invisible ties of mutual protection. As night fell, Max lay down beside Anna's bed in Estella's house. The girl fell asleep with her hand resting on the dog's soft fur, finally free of nightmares. The animal kept his eyes open, ever watchful, as if to say that as long as there was courage, instinct, and loyalty, hope would always be rescued, sometimes by paws that no more than words can ever say.